are here really to start a process of engaging communities, students, the academia about the importance really of the G20. And we're just actually sharing a conversation now with the MEC that BRICS came and gone, but at some point ordinary people could not really touch it. It was just something that was there. But some of the issues that in the discussion and the decisions that will be taken on our behalf. But we really don't get a sense of what we are on about and what we are talking about. So the view of the Gauteng government is that let's use the institutions of higher learning, because you've got young people there. Let's go to communities and start engaging with them, and obviously bring people for, so that we can then have this particular conversation, and they can actually have, first to understand what this whole animal is all about, and ultimately, and also then to make find a way to make an input. And now, colleagues, you'll know that we are grateful to UJ, Dr. Yerden, for really the UJ hosting us, and ironically UJ is also finishing 20 years. I was saying when I was a student activist, it was still raw. So the UJ element always takes a bit of time, but we are quite happy that UJ is finishing 20 years in a G20. And you'll know, colleagues, the theme is around solidarity, is around equality, is around sustainability. And I think South Africa will all know that it's been quite strong on the solidarity element, that we just need a just world. And I think we are quite happy, and I suspect the leadership of the country will be able to amplify that message to the leaders of the world, without necessarily picking up, because there will be a lot of people really who are going to be engaging with us. But this is a very influential group. It's extremely influential. That's why we can't let it go that it gets decided at almost at an ivory tower level without really engaging us, because it constitutes about 85% of the world's GDP. So, so what they say and what they engage about is quite, it's a very quite serious conversation. But having said that, colleagues, we will call Professor Yerden. We'll also have the MEC. She's an MEC of Agriculture, but officially she's the head of international relations on behalf of the executive. That's why she's here. So don't miscrude it to say, well, we are not as slim as Dabil. She's quite correct to be here. And then I think what is of great importance, as I've said, the civil society is here, the youth is here, and I think we'll be able to engage and I'll introduce colleagues as we move along together with the DTI, as well as the professors of the institution. And we're also blessed to have the MMCs from the city of Johannesburg really to be here. As I've said, colleagues, I really don't want to take long. I'll want Prof. Yerden, if you can just first come and welcome us to the university in a normal, traditional African setup. We don't just come and speak without being welcome. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Vuyo. First and foremost, let me take the opportunity. I'm Oscar van Yerden, associated with the Center for African Diplomacy and Leadership here at the University of Johannesburg. And as you can imagine, the center is taking the lead with regards to G20, international relations, and the politics thereof. So in that capacity, I want to welcome the Premier's office. Hopefully the Premier might join us a bit later. The provincial government, MEC, you are welcome, whether in your capacity as agriculture or international relations. Both are important in the G20 with regards to food security and the likes. The officials from provincial government, and of course representatives from the C20 and the Y20, civil society as well as the youth. As you know, with the G20 they have parallel structures that also meet, discuss, and hopefully influence, and hopefully get some of their demands met through the G20 process. So you are welcome. My fellow academics from the university, you are welcome, as well as those from the media and of course, the most important constituency, our students. You are all welcome here at the University of Johannesburg.
No, thank you very much, Dr. Van Nerden, Oscar. A lot of my friends call you Oscar, so I don't know in the academic space you are called Oscar, but normally academics are not all that. Colleagues, we will then call Mr. Suklal from DTIC just to give us, in the midst of the situation we find ourselves, what is our trade policy? And generally, what has been our approach and our perspective around that. So I'll give you space, Mr. Sukal, to just come in. Yes, please come in here. Come in.
Thank you, Chair and MEC, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon to all of you. As Vuyo has already informed you, I am from the DTIC, the trade branch, and we are, as the DTIC, we lead on the Trade and Investment Working Group within the G20. I was hoping that, according to the program I received, that Durko was going to do the first presentation, and that they would set out the broad, give you a broad overview of what exactly the G20 is. And I was intending to speak mainly about our trade priorities in the G20. But I'll give you a quick snapshot. As you may be aware, the G20 was established in 2009 in the wake of the financial crisis. And it was an evolution whereby the developed countries for the first time realized that they could no longer do it all by themselves, and that developing countries were increasingly becoming significant players in the global economy. So, and because they were suffering the worst effects of, well, as they perceived it, the financial crisis, they brought in the bigger economies from the south, including us. So it then expanded to what it was until 2023. So we had 19 countries and the EU as one, which made it 20. And then in 2023, during India's presidency, we admitted the AU, which was a very significant advancement for us as African countries. So we now actually have 21 parties in the G20, and it's the preeminent forum for the discussion of global issues that cuts across the political issues, economic issues, trade issues, as well as generally reform of the international financial architecture and the United Nations. Now, as South Africa, the theme that we have put forward for the G20 is solidarity, equality, and sustainability. As we believe this is, these are three critical components of a platform that we intend to build within the G20 in addressing the global disparities which we are witnessing currently and which we see continuously getting wider and wider. So as the DTIC, the program that we have put forward for the Trade and Investment Working Group, which I must point out is one of the most influential working groups in the G20. This is the group that discusses the really tough issues, like the WTO negotiating issues, rules on investment, intellectual property, and investment flows, the industrialization, and now increasingly the digital economy. As someone who has been involved in the TIWG now for the last, well, this will be my 5th year, I have developed quite a good grasp of how it works, how the various members come into it, and from the different perspectives. And our first, and I think I should point out up front that one of the biggest difficulties we're going to face during our presidency is this, what I would call a curveball that we're now having to deal with, which is the US. And the fact that they are upending everything that we know as the multilateral trading system, as well as the global economic and political arena. So that is something that we are going to have to confront and address as we move forward during our presidency. As the DTIC, we have identified 4 priorities that we will table in the working group. The first one is on trade and inclusive growth. As you know, inequality across the world has not only widened, but it continues to widen at an accelerating pace. Electorates across the world, both in developed and developing countries, are increasingly disillusioned. We can see that in the rise of the right in Europe, the US, and now even in developing countries. We've seen it in Argentina. And much of this frustration is understandable because they're not seeing the benefits of this global growth, as is commonly referred to by our international institutions as well as our largest trading partners from the West. And we believe this needs to be addressed. So how can trade can be an engine of growth, but not by itself. There are various other criteria that need to be addressed in order for the inequalities to be addressed. So we will be tabling this with the idea of developing a set of principles on trade and inclusive growth for the G20 to adopt. And I must point out that nothing in the G20 is binding. It is all voluntary, so it's basically best endeavor. But the outcomes in the G20, in as much as they may be viewed as being just symbolic, but they do carry significant weight. Our second priority is on green industrialization, as under which we want to address the issues of local beneficiation and including issues such as transfer of technology, the development of skills, and basically how do we, as Vuyo was saying, how do we transmit the outcomes of the G20 into concrete value for our citizens and all our people. The third one is on WTO reform. As you know, this is a standing item on the G20 agenda, and it has been for many years. And the debate, or the impasse, if I can call it, as we speak in Geneva, and this has been for the last several years, the developing countries and the developed countries cannot agree on how. Everyone agrees that the WTO should be reformed, but it's the how and the what that there is no agreement. Developed countries simply want to address the issues of interest to them, mainly dealing with intellectual property. They want more guarantees on investment, especially when they invest in developing countries. They don't want to address reform of the global agricultural markets. Let me see, as I'm sure you're aware. And this is an issue that we have put on the agenda, that the reform of agriculture must be addressed. Indonesia, India, and Brazil tried over the past 3 years to do it, but it didn't fly. The US and the EU in particular will not hear of it, but we will continue trying to address it. And lastly, it's the issue of how do we address what we call the global commons. And under this, we're talking about climate change, the digital markets, digital economies. What we're seeing increasingly is unilateral measures by the developed countries. The EU's Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM as we call it, is the most prominent example of unilateral measures which have huge implications for, not for developing countries, but particularly for what you may call a small open economy like ours. It will significantly affect our exports to the EU and also third markets. And we are strongly of the view that if everyone is committed to addressing climate change, then climate mitigation measures must be decided multilaterally. You cannot have one party, and especially a big party like the EU, setting the rules by themselves, because then that is a beggar thy neighbor approach, and it's only going to take us down the road to destruction. So those are the four key priority issues that we as DTIC have put on the agenda. Our first meeting is due to be held from the 18th to the 20th of March. But as you may be aware, we have, as South Africa, proposed the establishment of 3 task forces. And Task Force 1 is the one that deals with the trade and economic issues. And it's co-chaired by DTIC and Labour. The first meeting of the task force will be, it's scheduled for next Friday, but it's looking increasingly now like it'll be postponed to March, largely due to the fact that the DIRCO minister and the finance minister still have to meet to finalize a position on this task force. I'm mentioning that task force because it looks at a lot of the issues that we are going to be covering in the TIWG, and it will also give us what I would call a marker in terms of how the other countries are going to respond to our theme, as well as the deliverables that we have set ourselves. You're all probably aware that the US has made it very clear they will not entertain any discussion of any issue on climate change or green transitions, beneficiation of minerals at source, which is something that is very key for us, particularly for the African continent. So one of the main things that we as South Africa are going to have to work very quickly on is what is our plan B? How do we keep the US on board without completely undermining the objectives that we've set for our presidency? That's it from my side, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
No, sorry. Thank you very much. Actually, you're lending us where I wanted you to lend us on the global analysis, Dr. Yerden. I think we are hosting this thing at a very interesting times of what's happening there. Please come in, put Oscar, and then just unpack what we'll call the balance of forces globally, or the global analysis. Thank you so much.
Sure. So that's a big question. Thank you. I think DTIC as the opening remark is where I want to start, which is with the 2008 2008-9 financial crisis. People call it the financial crisis. The heading I want us to talk about is thinking beyond capitalism. Very controversial. But people call it the financial crisis, but actually it was the end of capitalism as we know it. Because for the first time, with the collapse of the financial markets, the central governments and central banks intervened and actually gave money to rescue what is known as capital. And that was the first time that has ever happened. And by doing so, one could argue, and I do, that that was really the end of capitalism as we know it. When you read the book by the former finance minister of Greece, Yanis Varoufakis, on techno-feudalism, it's his latest book. He talks of, you realize that the writing of Karl Marx is still very relevant in today's era, because when Karl Marx was talking about feudalism and how it went through the dialectical and historical period to actually translate into landlords and therefore the bourgeoisie, I think Varoufakis is doing the same in the 21st century with this book, and basically saying that we are all techno-feudalists. We are addicted to technology. Our children, us as well, but we'd like to blame the children, cannot survive without it. The phone is an extension of your arm, and so on and so forth. So we are just feudalists in this techno world, and the new bourgeoisie is what Janus refers to as the cloudist elite, the landlords. They are the cloudists, and those techno-cloudists are the Elon Musks, the Bezos, the Zuckerberg, etc. They are now the ones that are the new elite and having control over capital as we know it. So it's a very interesting book. You have to read it. Now, from a geopolitical economy, there's also been some changes, as you've mentioned. We talk of, for example, the clash of the titans. And the titans is, again, even within the techno world, there are only really two titans, which is the United States and China. Europe doesn't feature. It is nowhere in the game in terms of technologically. They don't bring anything to the party, even though they are the wealthiest continent, even though there are 500 million people. At this stage, where the balance of forces are, Europe is irrelevant. It's a very bold statement to make, but I challenge anyone who wants to challenge that. Coupled with this is the weaponization of the US dollar and the international financial system. As the empire, the unipolar superpower, loses its power, waning its power, it opts, instead of the carrot, which is to engage with its competitors, China, India, and others, it opts to rather come with the stick approach. And so it weaponizes the international reserve currency, which happens to be the US dollar. And because of that, they do two things. One, they print as much money as they want, because no one is going to, no one can do anything to them, because it's the international reserve currency. And so their debt levels are into the trillions. I mean, it's off the scale, actually. There's no other country that would be able to function in the international system with that kind of levels of debt to GDP. But they do that. And two, because they are the masters of the US dollar, they impose sanctions on countries which they don't agree with, and the latest being possibly South Africa. But there has been many before: Iraq, Iran, Libya, Venezuela, and so many others, Zimbabwe, and so on and so forth. Many, many others. And so, and the latest again is, well, not the latest, we are possibly the latest, but in recent times, Russia, with more than 1,500 sanctions. So when you weaponize the US dollar, when you weaponize the international financial system, and in the case of Russia, I think it's important to mention, I mean, some unprecedented sanctions like, for example, freezing of the country's foreign reserves that has been held in European banks. This has never happened before. It simply means, in the case of South Africa, because we are now in the target line or in the sights of the Trump administration, they could very well seize our foreign reserves that is being held in European and foreign banks, because they've done it to Russia to the tune of $300 billion US. And they genuinely and honestly thought that that would cripple the Russian economy. It didn't. But that's because of oil, gas, and many other things. I'm not sure we will be able to survive something like that. And I'm certainly not discarding it, because we are dealing with literally, this is the G20, so we must be a bit careful with our language use, but we're dealing with someone who is quite erratic in the most powerful economy in the world. So I don't want to say, we must forget about the time that we thought we were unique, this exceptionalism of South Africa, because we are having a target on our back. Now, when you do that, the direct response is that you need to find alternatives. So the United States can't be surprised that there is talk of a different international system. There's a reason why BRICS, for example, decided to have the new development bank, because of the agendas that is being pushed by the IMF, the World Bank, and as we've just heard, even the WTO, the World Trade Organization, serving the interest of the global north, of the collective west, at our expense. Similarly, there is talk, still a long way off, but there is talks of a BRICS currency. Because if you can be manipulated with the current reserve currency, then that is a problem for many. And finally, there's also the talk of having an alternative international payment system, because they also removed Russia from Visa, MasterCard, SWIFT. This is unbelievable, quite frankly against international law, but they do it because they are the powerful and they make the decision. So South Africa is finding itself in a very precarious position at the moment, and so that diplomacy that you are talking about, let's hope that between Ramaphosa and Lamola, they are able to steer the ship with these stormy weathers. Now, obviously, and I think everyone has heard, there is these groups, we don't want to call them factions, but there are these groups, which is the Global North and the Global South. And I think this G20 in South Africa, for the first time on the African continent, clearly wants to bring the plight of the Global South onto the agenda, and more specifically, Africa, because it is the first time that it is taking place on the African continent. So the progressive parts of the bourgeoisie globally, as well as the left generally, are in retreat. And as the previous speaker has mentioned, this is why there has been this resurgence of right-wing ideology within Europe, Eastern Europe, as well as now in the United States of America, to the extent where we even have Hitler's salutes and things at the presidential inauguration. And so I guess what I'm saying, to just sketch this very bleak picture, neoliberalism is under attack. Neoliberalism is in a crisis. Because, remember, we mustn't be fooled by these different political parties. It's the same with the ANC and the DA. That's probably the most controversial statement I'll make today. But it's the same, the Tories in the UK and Labour is no different. They all serve the neoliberal agenda. They might tweak a few differences. It's the same with the Republicans and the Democrats in the United States. They squabble over homosexuality and a few gun rights, but actually the broader neoliberal agenda they completely agree on, and they maintain that internationally. And so the vehicle that was opted to facilitate that neoliberal agenda was globalization, and unfortunately now it has failed. I think we all know It is no longer serving the purpose that it's supposed to, and hence, as you correctly point out, there's this rumblings from civil society, from the ordinary people on the ground, because they are not feeling the effects of this new world order. So the agenda here, to conclude, in the different working groups, the T20s, the B20s, the Y20s, and especially what Gauteng must do is to obviously try and optimize its returns going forward. The city is in a crisis, city of Johannesburg. And there's so many things. I don't want to get into the technical. I'm not qualified to talk of the technical aspects. But it's clear that what Gauteng needs to concern itself with and its metros is debt financing. It's about water infrastructure. It's about energy and food security. And, of course, peace and security, particularly crime. So with those unfortunate words, to sketch that global, this is the context in which this G20 is taking place, and it puts enormous pressure on the presidency of this G20, Ramaphosa and his administration, to try and navigate how they are going to try and get through all of these things. Because unfortunately what is happening is that the G20 summit is now being used to settle other geostrategic and geopolitical scores. That has nothing to do with us. But unfortunately, we are in the crossfire. So it's going to take some clever footwork, MEC, going forward from the national government and everyone else involved in this G20. And as from our side, as the academics, we can only but give you the critical thinking around these things, but we want to wish you all the best. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Doc, for that. I think then, colleagues, maybe just one thing that I did not do, Prof, before you don't welcome us again in the university, is to obviously introduce some of the leadership of the university. We've got Professor Dominic, who is A1, the Center for Public Governance. If you, please. And we also have Mr. Ashal Patel, who's a Center for Global Dialogue, and is also a member of the T20, am I correct, Prof? And we also have Dr. Guy Mihundo from University of Johannesburg Language Unit. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, the reason I'm coming there, Mr. Mfundis, is because now in your aspect together with Mr. Singh, as Sherpas, I want you to first expand what is a Sherpa, because we don't move on the assumption that we know what you're talking about. As I'm saying, never mind that we're in a lecture hall, what it looks like, and in the university, but really we want to live here better off. So I'll call you to come in to speak about really the role of the civil society, and I think Doctor leaves it there to see what then becomes the role of the civil society. And then Singh will come in and speak about the role of the youth in the whole aspect of it. And then the academia, if you can come in, Mr. Patel, then we're able to deal with this aspect. And then we're able to converse. But please to come forward.
No, thank you, Program Director, MEC, and all esteemed guests. Maybe let me start there in terms of the Sherpa. And I'm going to explain it through a story that speaks to a journey I had to traverse. I'm sure all of us, we know the Drakensberg Mountain. My wife is she likes to do a mountain climbing. She even has gone to the Kilimanjaro, and she's forcing me to do hiking. So she forced me 2 years ago to do what they call the mini traverse. There is the traverse, you travel the whole of the Drakensberg, but you can do half of it. It was 5 days that we had to be in the mountain. There was about 6 or 7 of us. But in our journey, we had 4 gentlemen who were making it easy for us. Because for us it was fun, but for them it was paid a responsibility. I am not a hiker. The people I was with, including my wife, had been hiking they've gone to many different mountains. They like it, they were talking about it, and all I wanted to do was to just get over and done. So we arrived on Sunday in Wettishoek, and then, the first climb, the first day was very nice. On Monday, we ended up at the top of the Tugela ferry. Some of you see it only on pictures and videos. I went there, but I didn't go. I didn't go there because I wanted to. So I'm coming back to the story of the Sherpa, that these 4 gentlemen, on the last day, which was on a Friday, when others who had gone through mountaineering and they like it, and there was the last one, the Achter Os Kom Ook en die Kral, and that was me. And Vusi, you may not know him, but he was my Sherpa, because he carried me throughout that torturous journey that others enjoyed, and I arrived 2 hours later than everybody had arrived. And Vusi, as the Sherpa, made sure that I don't get lost, I don't give up, because even if I were to give up, no one will come there and actually get me. I had to take every step until the last step. And when I arrived, they did what you guys did, was to clap for me that I had done my mini traverse because I had a Sherpa. So part of our role is to actually walk others through this particular journey so that we all arrive. My chairperson in the C20 is Comrade Tulani Chefuta, who currently, as we speak, he's at an engagement that government has. There is the working group on employment that is in Gqeberha, and he is part and parcel of that to articulate issues that we want to see being achieved. And those issues, colleagues, maybe you are very far, but you can see there are people amongst us who come from the sector of persons with disabilities. For them to be part of this conversation, something extra needs to be done for them so that there is that equalizing factor. Because if we were just to go on with our lives, to go on and talk about these things and forget about them, they would be excluded. And part of our role as civil society, as Prof indicated, this process of the G20 was started in 2009. But in 2013, the engagement groups were now allowed to be part of this process. And the first one was the Civil Society Engagement Group. We came into that fray in 2013. Those who have followed the issues will know that there were fights during the World Economic Forum by civil society to try and get themselves in. And they were never included in those World Economic Forum engagement. But at least with regards to the G20+1, we have been given a seat to engage and contribute towards these global issues. Because we're talking with Comrade Levi, everything that we do is political. Even though we're civil society, it is our engagement with our government, which engages with other governments, so that the issues that the colleague from DTIC was talking about, the issues that Prof was talking about, can actually find space, and those governments that have a good heart can actually drive them. The next host of the G20, guess who it is? It's the United States of America. It is the United, because it rotates. So already this decision has been taken from South Africa. President Ramaphosa, as the G20 president, must hand over to Donald Trump. I don't know whether he will be here, because there are ministers of foreign affairs who are meeting. And on a tweet through Elon Musk platform, and I saw yesterday Elon Musk was putting there that, he owns X, and he is taking abuse from all over and everybody there. But you can see where that actually comes from. It comes from the analysis that Prof is talking about. So our issues, colleagues, is also to deal with the issues that civil society wants to drive. One of those, we all know that the world, New Year was on the 1st of January, né? But the New World Order started on the 20th of January. We know what happened on the 20th of January. Donald Trump took over the presidency of the US and he made executive orders. In the bigger scheme of things, they may not mean anything, but for South Africa, those executive orders meant that the bilateral support that South Africa had been receiving, which includes supporting our HIV program, 17%, which equates to about 7.9 billion, was just taken away from that particular decision. Because as we speak now, even in academia, people who were receiving support from the PEPFAR, which is the Presidential Emergency Response Program, they no longer have access to those resources. The support of South Africa's response to HIV was just directly affected. So these global issues, these engagements that happen, they actually affect us, and they also put to the fore the issues around the architecture of the financial institutions and the impact of what that particular position actually means for us. One of the issues we have been advocating, which we will continue to advocate, speaks to what Prof was also talking about. I mean, my colleague was talking about the issues about the WTO reforms and issues relating to TRIPS, because of that money that the Americans said we will no longer have access to, 0% of that is not coming from them. 100% of the ARVs that South Africa pays for people who are HIV positive. And by the way, just to contextualize that, we have an estimated 7.9 million South Africans that are HIV positive. Of that, about 5.5 million are on antiretroviral treatment, and it is all paid for by the South African government. So, and that, puts our investment into the HIV response, which is a health crisis that we have, at about 74%. So one of the issues we're talking about is, who are we buying these drugs? An SMME from South Africa. We're buying them from the American multinational pharmaceutical companies. And we want to change the architecture of that global financial system so that it works for us. So those are the issues we're dealing with. And as we deal with those, we must, one day Jacob Zuma, when he was president, was asked about the economics. And he said that his understanding of economics is about whether the neighbor next door has food on the table. So it may not mean anything, but when we talk about these particular issues that South Africa is being punished for, it may result in that neighbor who already has issues of food insecurity being exacerbated because we are not putting our best foot forward. And part of that putting best foot forward is to ensure that as civil society, we change our understanding of politics as well, because everything that we do is political. So we may think that we are cushioned, we are okay, but we also have international NGOs, which are called INGOs. And they are pushing an agenda in terms of what should happen, which agenda is also linked to what Prof clearly articulated for us, people who want to take over the world and run the world. So part of what we do is to advance MEC, the issues that we need to advance, to ensure that that which is happening here is actually taken to the doorsteps of our wards so that we have engagements as people in South Africa. But in doing so, we need to understand that it is political, it is within the globalized economy. So for us, we have identified from the 15 working groups or 15 key thematic areas that government has in terms of the G20, as the C20, 14 working groups. And those working groups relate to issues relating to women and gender as the first one. And we want all voices, both in South Africa, from the African civil society in the diaspora, as well as international organizations, whom we must also treat with care so that they don't come and influence us, so that we say things that are anti to what our government wants to actually achieve. The second working group is on people-to-people interaction and solidarity, because it is about ensuring that we create and advocate for a better world. Poverty alleviation and food security, and MEC will speak more about this, but MEC, we would bring those civil society organizations to participate in the forum that you spoke about to ensure that the issues around food insecurity and related issues are dealt with through the inputs that we will be making. The fourth one is on democratic governance, civic space, anti-corruption, and access to justice. The fifth one is on cultural diversity, recognition, and embracement. The sixth one is on trade and sustainable development. The seventh working group that we have is on sustainable and resilient communities and disaster risk reduction. The eighth one is on quality education for future sustainability. The ninth one is on employment opportunities and retention, just energy transition, environment and climate sustainability, science, research and innovation investment, tourism, and the last one being equitable health for all. And this must also link with South Africa's push to ensure that we have universal health coverage through the national health insurance. When we articulate and we advocate, the president, from the president, all the MPs, including the MEC, it's people that have privilege. We need to smash this privilege, because whilst we have the health system the way it is, it must work for them because they have medical aid. It must work for someone who does not have medical aid and have to wake up at 4 a.m. to go to Helen Joseph, hoping to be provided with health services. If it means that we have to take these resources elsewhere and attend to those particular issues, that is what we will do. So our advocacy is to ensure we bring all these voices through these working committees and link with what Comrade Levi will speak to. There is the Y20, which is the Youth 20. There is the W20, Women 20. Comrade Ashraf comes from the T20, which is the Think Tank 20. And I need to also say this, that as Gauteng was organizing this engagement, he was prodding us and saying there is this dialogue that's going to happen. Make sure you interact with these people so that you are also there in that particular engagement. And that means that he was not in it for himself because T20 is covered. He was saying we want the other voices as well. So that is the challenge that we have as C20, to ensure that we link up with Y20, with T20, Women 20, to ensure that we advocate for D20, which is Disability 20, to ensure that the issues that we advocate for with our government and our government interacting with other governments, because we will not be there at the G20 Summit. Only our policy pack will find its way there. But what we are doing, MEC, is that as the departments are having this working group, we are inserting ourselves into those working groups. Hence, the working groups we have are linked to what government is doing. We are also intervening in those, because the normal process is that this is for and about governments. But we are also saying we're here in South Africa. If the government is to articulate what we want, let us engage with you at that very beginning, so that we don't fight for space when it comes to us just submitting a document that, as you have articulated, will be meaningless because it has not been integrated. Our issues have not been integrated. So as I finish, Chair, we have, we had a meeting on Sunday where we're dealing with the global health challenges and how we as C20 can, integrate into those issues. And those relates to something called the Global Fund, which is a recipient of money from the global countries of the world that are contributing towards it. South Africa will be leading the replenishment of the Global Fund for its next funding cycle. And that is a legacy left by former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. It has saved over 24 million lives through those particular contribution. What we have called for, MEC, you deal with issues of international relations. Our colleague also deals with this. We want diplomacy, but we want fearless diplomacy. Because sitting in a corner, selling our souls, just because you want Donald Trump to be happy, is going to make you to fight with us. And fight we will. But if we tell the people that we're engaging with in those closed doors of diplomacy that this is who and what we believe in, then we will have a better outcome from this process. So we commit to work with everyone in the process of being the Sherpa for civil society, but also as civil society in general in terms of C20, to ensure that the issues we want, both from South African civil society, African civil society, as well as international civil society, are consolidated in a manner that gives us a better world. I thank you.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Mfundis. So I assume we won't be marching this time around, because I know those platforms are very naughty for a lot of civil society. The whole aspect in the global world. I think I'm going to give it to you. What I will do, Mr. Patel, you'll then either come now or you then come as part of the conversation, and then we're able to then give the MEC just to wrap it up for us. But please do come through.
Thank you, Program Director, and greetings to the MEC and the leadership of UJ. My name is Levi Singh. I currently serve as the Sherpa to the Y20. I bring warm greetings from the chairperson, Raymond Matlala, who is preoccupied in another Y20 engagement. As many of you might know, we are 39 weeks away from the Leaders Summit in November, so things are happening fast and furious, and we're all trying to stay on our feet. I think Comrade Mabalane has eloquently summed up what the Sherpa role is really, and he's given a good indication of the working groups as well as the engagement groups. There are 13 engagement groups in total, spanning labor, business, youth, women, think tanks. There's even some more obscure ones like the oceans, etc., etc. And we encourage comrades not to just focus on specific demographic groups, but look at the thematic groups that might be of interest and of alignment. So when it comes to young people, as we had mentioned, this is the first time that the African continent will chair or preside over the G20. Africa has the youngest population in the world. The average age of an African in Africa today is 19 years old. So as President Ramaphosa said, this needs to be a people's G20, but the Y20 perspective is that this needs to be a young people's G20 in particular, because young people are at the forefront of being excluded from economic, educational, and social development opportunities wholesale. And ultimately, we need to leverage the G20 to ensure that young people's development is put back on track. Can I get agreement in the audience? Fantastic. So I think let me go into the thematics of the G20 that we're trying to promote as the Y20. Mabalane has spoken about 14 working groups that the C20 are working on. As the Youth 20, we've tried to be a bit more pragmatic and a bit focused, so we've boiled it down to 5 broad thematic issues. So the first thematic that we're focusing on is climate change and environmental sustainability. I think we can all see the fact that Africa and Africa's young people and young women in particular are at the forefront of climate vulnerabilities. This has greater impacts on food insecurity, etc., etc. So locating climate change and environmental sustainability right at the top of the agenda as an intersectional issue is of massive importance. We aren't too perturbed by what the United States feels about this one. It is an existential issue, and we must confront the reality of climate change. Inclusive economic growth and employment. So we all know the state of unemployment, not just in South Africa, but across the African continent. Young people are massively excluded from the economy, both the informal and the formal. So figuring out what inclusive economic sustainable growth and development looks like, and figuring out issues that can be advanced to tackle unemployment is a major focus for us. Then we get into a bit more of the complex ones, so meaningful youth engagement and reforming multilateralism. Previous speakers have spoken about the fissures that exist within the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and even into broader multilateral spaces like the UN Security Council. These are institutions and organs of multilateralism that have been established in many cases without the presence of African states. Many of these have been established in the shadow of World War II, and they aren't really reflective of our needs and priorities. So what is the vision of young Africans as it pertains to the institutional reforms that need to be undertaken of these multilaterals, and how do they become more representative? One of the key statistics that we've thought around when developing this work stream is that young people, we currently have the largest generation of young people in human history. There's around 1.8 billion young people that are under the age of 25. But ultimately, we only comprise of 3% of all global people that are represented in parliaments globally under the age of 30. So there's a massive disconnect between the people that are making the laws, undertaking these negotiations, making the policies, and those who are actually the beneficiaries of the policies. So we need to figure out how to bridge that gap, and that's exactly what this working group is focused on. And the last two ones that are of thematic priority for us is artificial intelligence, digital innovation, education, and the future of work. And that's a really broad one, but it's touching on everything from ECD all the way to the basic education system and then into the higher education space. Artificial intelligence, as we all might know, is the new big thing that everyone is focusing on. The tech oligarchs are putting tons and tons of money into artificial intelligence. It's projected by 2030 that artificial intelligence will contribute 14% of the world's GDP. But where are we as young Africans when it comes to being able to leverage the opportunities that come with artificial intelligence? How equitable is artificial intelligence and its rapid advancements? And where do we locate artificial intelligence in the broader stream of the digital economy, as well as higher education and basic education? And the last thematic priority that we will be focusing on is social development and fighting inequalities. I don't have to say much on this. Comrade Mabalane has covered this one quite extensively, but this is the broad one where we're locating issues around gender equality, food security, universal health coverage and the national health insurance, adolescent and youth health in particular, eradicating teenage pregnancies and addressing the scourge of gender-based violence. But really being led by President Ramaphosa's clarion call of leaving no one behind and ensuring that this is a people's G20 and a young people's G20 in particular. The last area that I'll focus on is the key outcomes of this Y20. So we're not just engaging over the next 38 weeks for the sake of engaging. We really want 4 clear outcomes from this as young people. We're looking firstly at establishing an alumni association for the Y20. So the Y20 has been around since 2010, but there's been no structured approach as to how young people continuously engage in the Y20 once it moves from one country to another country in terms of its chairship. So we need member states to put resources and financial mechanisms in particular in place to ensure that there's a structure to sustain the good work that youth activists and advocates in civil society broadly are doing in the Y20 space. We would like to establish a Y20 Sherpa Council, and Comrade Mabalane has emphasized the importance of the Sherpas and the roles that the Sherpa play in terms of navigating the complexity of the geopolitics that comes with the G20. And ultimately, we'd like to influence the G20 Leaders Declaration. So our heads of states are going to be meeting in November in the next 38 weeks, and ultimately they're going to negotiate an outcome document, but we want to ensure that young people's voices, perspectives, and opinions are front and center of that Leaders Declaration. We should be able to look at that Leaders Declaration and say, we got that sentence, and that sentence, and that sentence, and that priority highlighted. And if we don't get that, then we failed. And the last big priority outcome for us is the social summit. How many of you have heard of a social summit? No? So the social summit was first undertaken last year under Brazil's presidency. There were over 35,000 people in attendance at the social summit. It was the first time that the G20 that happens at a very high level was really taken to people and communities and movements of people in their diversity. So President Ramaphosa's administration has committed that South Africa will host its own social summit. It will be hosted at a heads of state level before the Leaders Summit. So our role really as the Y20 is to ensure that there's massive participation of youth-led and youth-serving organizations, constituencies, movements, and formations of young people in their diversity. The last thing I will say is reiterating President Ramaphosa's words during SONA. As young people, our position is that we won't be bullied. We won't be bullied in particular in standing up for human rights and justice, equality and solidarity for all. So I hope that has been useful and I've achieved the task. Thanks.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Singh. Definitely we'll be working together, and we'll possibly unpack before I give it to you, MEC, what is the thinking from our end, and I think the audience will then have to tell us what is because for us what is important is that we can point at the stadiums, we can point at Gauteng to say during the World Cup something of this nature happened. This was a legacy that was left. But now we need to say, after G20, what can we then point generations to come that South Africa did host it? Mr. Patel, please do come through, and then I'll open up to colleagues to engage, and then you will then come in, MEC, afterwards. Yeah, dealing with the thinking of this thing. Okay.
Thank you, Vuyo. Thanks, esteemed colleagues, much appreciated. Our job is not to talk too much. The T20, not the technical 20, in a kind of electronics perspective, but think tanks and academia are playing some role within the G20 process. It was actually formed, I think, during the German presidency in 2017. The objective being to get academics, researchers from the various G20 nations to mirror the themes that our esteemed colleagues articulated. And so far, in fact, as at Monday, we received over 800 abstracts from the different G20 countries. So that's quite significant. And our role really is, I would call us the middle layer. So as you have in software and engineering, several layers, we sort of interact between the top layer, government, where the policy briefs are meant to go up, but we really committed to engage the different layers. Therefore, we insisted on the Cs, on the women 20, on the labor 20, on the business 20. We really like your views to percolate as we refine these policy briefs and then debate them. So really at a technical level, we're having our inception conference in 2 or 3 weeks' time. That's going to be a hybrid conference. I will check if that's available for students and other stakeholders to participate. We have a T20 conference in June that's going to be held in South Africa, where some of those academics from the G20 nations are going to participate. And if you're really at master's level, PhD, postdoc, we'd encourage you to participate in that. And then finally, we'll have a T20 Summit just before the Leadership Summit. And that's when the policy briefs get selected and then go up to government. I'd really like to also talk about, in the era of a rising tide of what is called right wing, where racism, identity, division is the norm, particularly in the US and now in Europe. Just this week, with the Department of Arts and Culture, we also have another C called Culture 20. And I believe that to be very significant. How do we really take African culture on the global stage? Now, here's an opportunity. We're just having the first meeting today, and we will engage with the different layers to say, how do we ensure that African humanity, Ubuntu, the values of Afrocentricity gets projected onto the G20. So we don't just become a consumer of G20 norms, but Africa as a continent creates its own norms and culture and projects that quite vigorously on the global stage as we face the rising tide of right-wing politics locally and globally. So that is a challenge for all of us to mobilize within our values of non-racialism, of solidarity, of equality, of progressiveness, and perhaps that can link with the social 20 and the C20. And I have no doubt we'll partner with government, all government departments, because we have to send a very strong message of solidarity and non-racialism to a global audience. So let's rally behind this and coordinate and as a national project. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Patel. MMC Nomoya. I was going to say that we need to partner with these guys from the city of Joburg. No, please, you can be excused, ma'am. And also MMC Makofola. Colleagues, let me just open up to yourselves if there are any inputs that you want to make, so that we don't come across as if we are in church, the pastors have said whatever, then we must go back fulfilled. So it's a conversation. So it will be number one, just introduce yourself. There was a number two, okay, ma'am, you'll be number two, and then so you'll be number three. Please come. Oh, is there a roving mic? Oh, yes.
Thank you. Afternoon, colleagues. Maybe, Chair, I must start by analysis of parties, because as an international player, you need to have your ducks in a row. I'm Keith Thabo. I'm in business, and I've been in business leadership, and I've been in so many platforms here internationally. The current challenge of South Africa in all those spheres is white business and politicians. During our youth, when we started business, from university, 93, 94, you were entered into business, and we became industrialists by practice, because by then, as a university graduate, we were able to get tenders from municipalities and provincial governments. Now all these tenders are going to officials and politicians. These kids, these youth, they'll never be industrialists in practice. Two, there's a disjunction between civil society, big business, universities and research institutions. You can go to CSIR, which should industrialize this youth, but the middle management has captured everyone. All the ministers from Malemi Pandor are engaged to Zimani. They could not, even the CEO of CSR doesn't know what he's doing. So those Afrikaners, the middle management, they give those intellectual properties to their friends, and they've got companies in Melrose, where as a black industrialist, you must subcontract under them. This economy was built by Afrikaners with sanctions all over the world. But the Afrikaners were able to be industrial and be able to export. Why is it that? They are only using CSIR. So civil society, we are creating a generation of pseudo-politicians who think they can be sit on laptop and order things through pen, which are being produced by Chinese and sell to a friend. They think they are in the economic system. Economics is industrialization and production. You can talk all these fancy words. And I'm disappointed by Jobs Fund Chairperson Tolan. That's Jobs Fund from Department of Labor, as espoused and as the young man was put in that leg. It should have been helping these kids, working with CETAs, working with research institutions. Those are making so wonderful things around this country. But may I pause there, because this is what I raise, because until you work together, you have project, you localize. I consult municipalities in my other life in terms of revenue enhancement model. You localize economics, industrialize, reference economics, as universities, civil society, but big business, remember, is not interested. Some of our projects will have to import foodstuff from India, package it from Romania, because there's mafiaism in the whole ecosystem, of which food consumption is almost 54% of GDP's consumption. If you don't play any productive role within that 54%, you have 54% out of any economic activity. So those are things that I want the youth, the MEC, the universities, and go home and take stock. In these countries, G20 BRICS is not some talk shows. People can produce, you can see what their president quantity thinks. So we have misled our kids, government officials, politicians, particularly at municipalities and provinces. They give it to zonal chairperson of the branch. Those kids, they won't get any government job, because that is a learning curve to us being an industrialist. Now I would wish to pause. I thank you.
No, thank you very much, Victoria. You can you can pass it through, but sorry, man. Do you have some colleagues in the office before I get billed by this gentleman for passing mic?
Good afternoon, colleagues. I am Prudence Lebogang Mushlamunyane. I am a circular economy and sustainability expert. I'm glad that the colleagues here, they should know about it, but our president knows about it. When we spoke of quality education for sustainable development, the United Nations has been very much involved with our country and continent, and as part of that, under the quality education for sustainable development, they trained us. They selected students or individuals, then they trained them to be the link of sustainability and inclusivity amongst all the countries that are involved in all this sustainability drive, solidarity, equality, right? So now, yes, we are not PhD level and so on, but we are, because now we are the ones that have the right skill set and trainings and resources for where is sustainability driving us as a continent and as a country and as a province, judging by why we are here today. So now, I'm here, I'm willing to engage with the relevant stakeholders and our colleagues to talk on the way forward, because we were trained so that we could be on the same level with all the countries that know more about sustainability. We say green tech and stuff, that is not what sustainability is all about or just about. It's a lot. That is why today we have Donald Trump saying what he's saying. Our president, when he said we won't be bullied, he knew that we have the right army to face what we are going through. We are going to get past it. We are here. Let's work.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Ospruden.
Siyathokoza Makhosi. My name is Dr. Malusi Mncube from here, University of Johannesburg. I would like to thank the program director for arranging all this, and I would like to thank also the youth and civil society. There are two glaring themes, according to me, that are missed, and I would love them to be included, obviously prefaced by a debate. Number one is the issue of racism, and I'll say why. Because racism is inextricably intertwined with the political global system of capitalism, of racism, where they other the ones who are not white. Hence, Donald Trump is speaking the way he's speaking. How he's speaking today is not new. It has been done from slavery right up to now. So, sitting as Tsotsi, Soweto, we are champisa. Donald Trump is just saying what his forefathers used to say when he says, I'm a good man, Gaza is a demolition area, I'm going to turn it into a real estate area and we'll move the Palestinians to Jordan and to. So the youth, to you and to you, civil society, as a theme, racism must be there and it must be enforced, because most importantly, what is being compromised is the black majority, the black body. Yes, we can be politically correct and talk about being African, including others, which is what we do, yes, in South Africa constitutionally. But we must not forget Abamnyama, the black body is excluded. Youth again, yes, we can engage government authority that must be carried out, but it's a good area to carry out influence. According to me, it reinforces BRICS. BRICS is very important because BRICS has a new development bank and it does have resolutions that are very legal, that are binding, that can be carried out. So for me, BRICS is very revolutionary. But what the G20 does, which we must do, is very important, but I suspect America is going to pull out, so maybe by November we'll be called G19. No, it's possible. It's possible because he's already pulled out money from World Health Organization. So, and he wants to slap sanctions on us. See Donald Trump, America pulling out because they're playing the protectionist game. But I want to come to the issue on the youth, and everybody who's listening here, the crux of the matter for me, what I have learned in life, and when I've studied this racism and enslavement of the black body, is the issue of money, who controls the money. And up to now, what disappoints me about my government, and I'm talking about all of us, and I'm talking to the youth and to the civil society. The fiat money we have created in South Africa, what we call legal tender, it's created by an act of parliament. I can understand that in 1994 we were being strategic because we do not have trained people, etc., etc. So right up to now, in creating that fiat money by an act, going for the choke point to our government by now to say, we will be represented at the Reserve Bank, and I will tell you why. They will tell you the independence of the Reserve Bank. That is not nonsense. The Reserve Bank is not independent. It's not independent because if you look at the people who constitute it, it's actually the commercial banks, your Standard Bank, your Absa, your Capital. Is that not a conflict of interest? So if they are there, why are you not there? That is the real issue. So if money making, creating credit to make money in by our government, whether it was the ANC then, is the GNU now, why are you not fighting? Why is this not part of a theme to say black bodies, the majority, you will sit at the Reserve Bank, you will sit at all the commercial banks, you will determine policies on how money is created and distributed here in South Africa. Why are we not there? Because we are only at the periphery, and those are the issues I want to persuade you. Not to just say the Reserve Bank doesn't represent the black man. You must be there to make those policies. And they must not tell you that you do not have the intellectual capacity, because even our leaders, when they took place in 1994, they were not schooled, they had to learn, right? All you have to do is to have the peripheral vision, and you must just have the commitment to learn. It is high time that we must be represented in the money-making system, and they must never tell you that you do not qualify. And that is where we do not want to be bullied, not just by Donald Trump, but by even our own elitist government in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. No, thank you so much, Dr. Ngube. So there's a challenge that we must be in the table. Colleagues, I don't know if there's any. Okay, ma'am, you can come. Okay, you'll be the first, then the second, then we just wrap it up. Okay, we'll wrap it up with you, ma'am, at the end.
Thank you so much. My name is Gladys Shabalala. I'm the chairperson of the Civil Society in Gauteng, and I'm the co-chair of Gauteng AIDS Council. Thank you so much, and I'd really like to applaud, the civil society of its efforts, and also the other colleagues in the G20. But mine is actually just to point out this.